Hello, everyone. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for this program from the National Gallery of Victoria. Although, as you can see, we're not at the National Gallery today. We're coming to you from our homes. But we'd love to share with some artworks with you today. So my name is Andrea, and I'm from the Audience Engagement and Learning team at the Gallery. So ordinarily we begin our sessions by acknowledging that we meet on the unceded lands of the Kulin people of Naarm, which we now know as Melbourne. However, as we're coming to you from different places today, we'd also like to acknowledge that we're coming to you from the lands of other traditional custodians and pay our respects to those communities and their elders as well. I'm in Fitzroy today, so I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, so I'd like to pay my respects to them and their elders. And today, joining me is my colleague Kate. Hello, Kate.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Curator of Children's Programs here at NGV, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Boon Wurrung people here where I live in Port Phillip, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kate. So today we're going to be looking at some items of lace from the NGV collection and also some portraits that of paintings that feature lace also in the collection. If you have any questions or comments at any time, you can type them into the chat bar on the webpage and we'll be able to answer them for you. But we look forward to sharing this with you today. Great, thanks, Kate.
Yeah, so this, Andrea and everybody, is a piece of lace that is in the NGV's collection, and it's really quite small, so I hope you can see it clearly on your screen. It measures about 9 centimetres in length, if you remember the school ruler, and about 0.5 centimetre in height. And as you look from left to right, we'd like you just to take your time and look closely at the detail of the lace. It has a lovely rhythm as we travel across, and as we look closely we can see birds and even snakes and floral motifs. And this little piece of lace, we think, would have been a trim for perhaps a smock or a trim on a cuff, on a cuff, I should say. And it comes from Venice, which is the home of lace, and it was made in the 1500s. It would have been made with needle and thread. So just a single needle and thread would create this beautiful piece. And then we're taking you in a little closer here, and you can see more detail of the lace. And you can see a bird, and on our screen it's a little upside down. But I've put a red circle around there to show its tiny eye, which is made with a little glass bead. So very fine and exquisite detail with this gorgeous piece of lace. And if you knit or crochet or sew, I think we can all appreciate the great skill of this particular lace maker.
Absolutely, Kate. This is quite remarkable when you look at all that tiny detail. And I just am so impressed with the skill to be able to make that and even to put that tiny bead for an eye.
Ever so tiny. And actually at the NGV, we have beautiful pieces of lace. This one's from Venice, but there are other pieces from France and Ireland as well. We'll just go to, it's interesting, Andrea, when we look at how lace is made. And I was quite surprised to see this cushion covered in bobbins.
Yeah, that cushion on the left there, it looks very confusing and complicated. I'm not sure how you would make any sort of pattern out of that. I think I'd definitely just make a mess.
Well, there's a nest of pins in the centre, and if there's anyone that's made lace, they would know that this is actually bobbin lace. So the piece of lace we were looking at from Venice was made with one single needle and thread, whereas this is made with multiple threads all attached to bobbins. And the lace maker would know exactly what they were doing. And the pins that in the centre would actually map out the pattern that's placed underneath, resting on the cushion. So you could just spend hours and hours threading and plaiting and weaving to create these extensive and detailed patterns of lace. And on the right-hand side, you can see a little more clearly how that works. There's fewer bobbins there.
I think the one on the left is interesting as well, the different coloured bobbins. Is that a system to remember which one goes where?
Well, Andrea, I do have to confess I am not a lace maker, but I did read that is how they track the work. And I'm sure there'd be people nodding their heads in agreement with that, that is a way of tracking which kind of stitch you're doing or which kind of weave. So here is another curious piece from the gallery's collection. It's like a sampler, and it just shows the different stitches of point or pillow lace. So point meaning needle point, the single thread, and the bobbin lace that sits on the pillow where you make multiple strands to combine. So it's interesting that it's quite tricky to tell the difference. And Andrea, I'm sure you'd like to have a go at guessing.
If I was going to guess which one was made using that method with the bobbins, I would say maybe the ones on the bottom row. And perhaps the top row looks more like it was made with a needle.
And fascinatingly, it's unless we have those labels sitting beneath, which tell us of where the different pieces of lace come from, it is very difficult to tell the difference between bobbin lace and needle lace. But the two pieces on the left-hand side that sit on the black card, that's actually the single thread, the needle point lace. And then the 4 pieces on the pink card are bobbin lace, which is more of that weaving and plaiting design that we saw. So just imagine sewing and stitching for hours and hours to create those textiles. A lovely peaceful activity to do. And we're just thinking about where lace comes from, and we talked about that particular piece from Venice. And this is a gorgeous photograph that's in the NGV collection by a photographer who resided in Florence, and it's of St. Mark's, Venice, in Venice, taken in the 1870s. And this is actually where the first pieces of lace were made and used. They were made for the priest vestments, for the altar cloths, and for chalice covers such as this one. But this is another incredibly delicate piece that measures 15 centimetres by 15 centimetres. Again, it's from Venice, made in the 1500s, and features the lovely little beads that are barely visible to the eye.
And what's in the centre there, Kate? Is that a bird?
Well, one of our colleagues did draw our attention to the centre and said it's a pelican feeding its 2 babies.
Quite a beautiful piece, isn't it?
Very beautiful, and would have taken perhaps months to produce. And would have, if we think of Venice and the many islands on Venice and each one having its own church, perhaps it comes from one of the many, more than 100 different churches in Venice. And then we'll just stay in Venice a little longer. And again, we have a gorgeous photograph taken of one of the grand palaces along the Grand Canal. So Andrea, just position yourself in a gondola and glide on by. And there we have the piece of lace that we were looking at. And you can see what I find very interesting is the similarities that we can connect with the Gothic facade of this beautiful palace with the delicate piece of lace.
You can really see the same sort of patterns there repeated, can't you?
Yeah, and just those little points at the top there, almost the same. Yeah, and it's a lovely lacy facade, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. And see, excuse me, the water there in front of that building would be, as you say, you can almost just imagine yourself on a gondola. You'd be nice and warm there probably at the moment.
Absolutely beautiful. And this building was built in the 1400s, and it was home to one of the prominent Venetian families, and it was gilt with gold. So imagine that shimmering in the reflection, a beautiful gold
Wow,
building.
that's amazing.
Quite showy,
Yeah,
I
it is
think.
a bit showy, isn't it?
And then perhaps you know of the Victorian lace too, the wrought iron lace that decorates many of the terrace houses and beautiful old Victorian homes here in Melbourne.
Isn't that interesting to see that it's quite still a popular pattern and popular aesthetic so many years later?
Yeah, and just to imagine this made of wrought iron, you know, the work, the physical labour to produce these
Mm.
pieces of wrought iron lace, and a strong contrast, I think, to the fine detailed stitching. I love walking and seeing the shadows that these pieces of wrought iron cast on the walls and the ground in the sunlight.
That's a lovely image.
So we'll look at some paintings too that are in the NGV collection that show details of lace. And we're looking at some of the lace icons across history. So we introduce you to Lady Mary Vere, a member of the British aristocracy back in the 1600s. And here she is in her fine garments. So it's almost a celebration of textiles and fabrics in this portrait, Andrea.
Yeah, my eye is particularly drawn to the curtain behind her. Well, obviously, firstly to Lady Mary Vere, she's quite stunning, but also the curtain behind her and how it shimmers in the light, and you can really feel the texture of it in quite a heavy fabric, can't you?
Very heavy and very cozy as well. She would be nice and warm positioned there.
I also love, I'm not sure what the term would be, but you can see at the bottom her petticoat underneath and the embroidery peeking through under that dark black velvet.
Yeah, and her shoes just resting on that beautiful Turkish carpet. Even the table is embroidered with beautiful stitching. And then if we look closely too, we can see this exquisite ruff that she's wearing. And it's a particular lace called reticella lace. And you can see it has almost like a geometric pattern to it. And that's because with reticella lace, they were working with the fabric, the weave of the fabric crossing left to right, up and down. And that informed that geometric pattern as the ground of the lace. And then,
It's
of
incredible.
course, it's incredible and
Mm.
would have taken probably a year to produce. And this particular ruff would have been dipped in saffron, from the flower, the crocus flower, and gave it a
And
lovely
can we,
warm colour.
yeah, I was going to say, can we tell because of the color?
Yeah, just that little golden hue, because it was most of the ruffs I've seen in paintings are white. You know, in the Dutch ruffs, but you could also perhaps order a blue or green ruff. So she's very wealthy, very distinguished woman, and she had about 7 children in her lifetime and 2 husbands. And this portrait, as mentioned, she was in her 30s, but believe it or not, Andrea, she made it to the age of 91 at a time when most people live till 35 years of age. So well done, Lady Mary Vere.
Absolutely. It's a very impressive innings.
It is. And when we look at the lace again, I think just the black velvet silk that she's wearing, the lace really, the black really highlights the detail of the lace. And Andrea, you were talking about the curtain too. So the particular artist, his name's William Larkin, a British painter, and this is the way he painted portraits. If you looked at many portraits by him, you would see that reoccurring curtain the person positioned in the centre, quite sombre, quite serious. And there's about 10 of these portraits that we know of. And this is the one that's held in the NGV collection. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about. We think about the lace and the making of the lace, but then the artist painting the painting and painting the lace. And it's almost like retracing the very stitches of the lace maker.
I guess even to make that lace and to get that perfect geometric pattern would be so difficult, let alone to replicate that in a painting.
The hand of a surgeon, don't you think?
Absolutely.
The tiniest of brushes.
Great detail.
And then we cross the channel to the Netherlands, and we have this wonderful portrait painted on wood of Frederick and Josina, a very glamorous couple. And Frederick is the son of the burgomaster or mayor of Utrecht. So this one's painted a little later than Lady Mary there, about 20 years later in the 1630s. So they're dressed in their finest of garments, both in black silks. And you can see the fashion has changed. Frederick's, we saw Lady Mary there with that impressive ruff. Now the collars are flattened. And even Josina's is quite flat with that little tip at the back there, showing the beautiful detail of lace. And lace is becoming very popular at this time, and it employs many people to produce lace. And you can see she's wearing lace in her hair. There's the lace cuffs. People are having lace bands made. Of course, you'd have to be very wealthy to afford this lace, so you could show it off in your house as well.
All the rage, was it?
All the rage. And
for men too.
Pardon?
For men as well, I see Frederick joining in.
Well, Frederick is in touch with his feminine side, don't you think, to wear some lace?
I love his boots as well. He's got fantastic shoes too. I don't know if everyone can see them that little, and the cape.
It's almost like he's got a ball on his foot, but maybe it's a giant pom-pom. And a wonderful cape. It's quite smashing, very dashing, holding his gloves. And he was very wealthy because, both of them they made their fortune in trade with Italy. And that's referred to in the scene where we see the Italianate building and the statue there. So lace in Holland was very popular as well. And the thread, the actual linen that was used to produce the lace was considered the finest. And, that people actually, it affected their health to prepare the thread. So you had to spin the thread, the flax linen, in dark and damp conditions, because if it was too dry, it would snap in two. And then to be a lace maker, I don't know if you've ever wondered, Andrea, but you would start this at a very young age.
Is that something you would learn at school, or how would those skills be passed down?
Well, you could learn it from your relatives and it'd be passed on in the family, or you could go to lace school, and noble women would set up these schools in small villages or at the convent as well. And you would learn lace making from about as young as 5 years of age. And by 9 years, you'd be very, very good at it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Now we're going to jump ahead 100 odd years later, and we're in the 1750s now.
I love this painting. It's one of my favourites to visit at the gallery.
It's a fantastic portrait. A group of friends, and we're looking at the most famous singer of his time there in the centre, and that's Farinelli, the castrato singer. And he sang in all the opera houses across Europe. He sang in England, France, Italy. He was the darling of the opera scene. And you're probably wondering why.
So it's Farinelli in the centre there, is it?
It is.
The
He's
rock
wearing a
star
lovely
of,
apricot coat.
the rock star of the group, the Elvis,
He's our Elvis.
or
And
Mick Jagger.
Tom Jones. And you can see the change in style. Much more relaxed in this dress. In his
Absolutely,
outfits.
it's very different to the couple we were just looking at, and they're very stiff fabrics and very formal. And here I see Farinelli's got a very loose collar. They look quite relaxed, like they're hanging out with their friends, and beautiful soft fabrics rather than the stiffness that we've had before.
Ready for a few champagnes, perhaps, after singing at their concert.
I think you told me before that he sung at Versailles. I think there's definitely some champagne to be had at Versailles.
Well, you know, he was hanging out with the rich and famous, so he did drop in to see King Louis XV, serenaded him with some arias, and King Louis was so impressed he gave him a portrait of himself, of course, in diamonds, no less.
Of course, yeah.
And, you know, threw a few gold coins, 500 of those. So, yeah, Farinelli dropped in because he was on his way to Madrid, the capital of Spain, and he stayed there for the rest of his life, singing to the king. So
Right.
his career done and dusted, and he never sang outside Spain once he moved to Madrid. And here he is with Teresa, who's a beautiful soprano singer, and she was a pupil of Farinelli, and perhaps even they had fallen in love.
They certainly look comfortable together.
Yeah, they're posing beautifully together, and his hand just gesturing towards her. I love looking at the hands in this painting, and of course the lace. But I think, Andrea, it's got a very informal feeling about it, like a group of friends, which they all are. And even the artist has put himself in the painting.
So that's the artist in the olive green, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if we look at each of these people, we get a clue as to what they do, what their role is. And the painter is a perfect example of that because he's holding his clutch of brushes. And then Farinelli is holding the music. And then to the left, we have the librettist who's writing the lyrics for the opera, and he's holding a quill. And then the music that Teresa's holding bears her name, bears the initials, I should say, of Farinelli. Even the dog is wearing a collar with the initials of Farinelli.
I love in this portrait how it looks like the painter's set the camera up on timer and has rushed around the back to be in the photo as well.
It's exactly right. And it's lovely just seeing his hand resting on Farinelli's shoulder, a sign of affection. But Farinelli is an amazing singer. I've read some amazing facts about his singing. Facts or myths or facts, I'm not sure.
Stories?
A few stories.
We'll never know.
You know, and each time you read the story, it just gets bigger and better. But apparently he could hold a note for a minute and
Wow.
sing over 3.5 octaves. So if you're a singer, you would know how impressive that is. And in one breath, he could sing 250 different notes, like a canary, let's say.
No wonder he was so popular.
The real darling. And apparently he sang to the king each night to give the king peace. And apparently it was the same performance every night. So a little bit like Groundhog Day.
That would get a bit repetitive, wouldn't it? Well, the king obviously didn't mind or enjoyed the repertoire, otherwise he could change it.
That's true. And this portrait, actually, it's quite interesting because Farinelli kept it all his life. And the artist, I think, is aware that we are looking at this painting today because he's left each person's name inscribed in this painting. So if you look really, really closely, on his brushes, he's placed his name, and the friend on the left, who's the lyricist, he has his name inscribed in the stone on the plinth. So I think that's interesting too, to think of many years later that we continue to enjoy this painting.
Absolutely, and I love Teresa's soft gown. I just really love how the fabric folds and falls towards the ground, and you can really feel the texture of it and the lightness.
Very beautiful. Yeah, all the different textures. The artist is very skilled and accomplished in this painting. And if we just peek below the brushes, there's a glimpse of Madrid in the distance. We'll just go to this lovely detail of the lace. And it's a lovely way to take in paintings, that we can look at a particular detail rather than say, I'm trying to understand the whole thing. There's portraits where you could just admire shoes one day, or in our case today, we're looking at details of lace in the paintings.
Yeah, we look forward to being able to open the gallery up when it's safe to do so, but it's so great in the meantime that we can connect with them and see art online and in these new formats.
Yeah, we really hope that you enjoyed this presentation and have a chance to just sit back leisurely with a cup of tea and enjoy looking at the art and these details of lace that we've enjoyed discovering ourselves.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you joining us and hope you've learnt something or enjoyed the session, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Kate, as well.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.